Hello everyone. Hope you are safe and sound. We will study a new chapter. Chapter number 8. How do organisms reproduce? Before we learn the mechanisms by which organisms reproduce, let us recall what we have studied in our previous standards. First of all, what is reproduction? The process by which all living organisms produce new individuals similar to themselves. This process is known as reproduction. You may have a question that why do organisms reproduce? Because one can think that reproduction is not necessary to maintain the life of an individual organisms, unlike all other life processes which are essential. These life processes we have discussed in chapter number 6. We have learned about nutrition, respiration, transportation, excretion. And we know that all these life processes are essential for all the living organisms. On the other hand, reproduction is not necessary to maintain the life of an individual organisms. On the other hand, if an individual organism is going to create more individuals, then a lot of energy will be spent in this process. Then one can think that also why should an individual organism waste energy on a process which is not necessary to stay alive? As we discussed that it is not like other life processes which are essential. So you may think that if it is not necessary to stay alive, then why should we waste a lot of energy for this process? Likewise, you can have many questions to think of. But how many questions we have related to reproduction, it is obvious that we notice organisms because they reproduce. Only because of reproduction, we notice all the organisms. If there were to be only one non reproducing member of a particular kind, it is doubtful that we would have noticed its existence. You may also think that how do we know that two different individuals are belonging to the same species? Usually, we say this because they look similar to each other, and by similarities, we can notice and we can conclude that two different individual organisms are belonging to the same species. And reproducing organisms create new individuals that look very much like themselves. Here, please keep in mind we are using word similar or alike or which look very much like themselves, which means they are not exact. Okay, please keep this in mind that reproducing organisms create new individuals that look very much like themselves or alive or similar. Now let us understand the new topic, which is do organisms create exact copies of themselves? So here we will understand this. As we have already discussed that organisms look similar because their body designs are similar. If body designs are to be similar, then the blueprints for these designs should be similar. Now, we know that organisms look alike to each other because their body designs means body structure, are similar, very nearer to each other, close to one another. And if their body structures are same, if they are similar, then the blueprints for this designs. Now here the word blueprints we will take as patterns. Okay, so the patterns of these designs will be similar. Okay, so in short, if the patterns of the body designs are similar, then only organisms will look similar. And that is why reproduction will involve making copies of the blueprints of the body design. What does it mean? It means that reproduction process will involve making copies of patterns of their body structure. Okay? Now, in Standard 9, we have already learned a chapter based on the cell, fundamental unit of life. There we learned that chromosomes are present in the nucleus of a cell. And what do they contain? Chromosomes in the nucleus of a cell contain information, and that is for what? It is for inheritance of characters which can be transmitted from one generation to the next generation. In short, remember that chromosomes contain information which will be transmitted from one generation to next generation. Or else we can say that the chromosomes present in the nucleus of a cell transmits the information of characters, and that is from parent generation to the next generation. Now, in which form will they transmit information? That also we have studied in Standard 9. We know that the chromosomes transmit the information in the form of DNA. Here in this picture, we can see that there is a cell. In the middle of the cell, we have a nucleus which is shown bigger in the next step, and there are chromosomes shown in the nucleus. In the third step, the chromosomes are shown and they carry information in the form of DNA. So here picture of DNA is also shown. What is the full form of DNA? It is deoxyribonucleic acid. What are this DNA? DNA in the cell nucleus is the information source for making proteins. Please remember this. The DNA in the cell nucleus is the information source for making proteins. If the information is changed, then what will happen? Different proteins will be made. And where are this protein made? That is in the DNA. So what will happen if information is changed? Different proteins will be made. And if different proteins will be made, then there will be different body structures or different body designs. So here is the answer that why organisms look similar and when they are not similar. Okay, so we as we discussed that organisms look similar because their body designs are similar, and if their body designs are similar, their patterns of the body structure will also be similar. But where is the synthesized protein in the DNA? So, if information is changed, then there will be different proteins made, and these different proteins will lead to different body designs. And that is why a basic process in reproduction is the creation of a DNA copy. Cells use chemical reactions to build DNA copies. What do cells do? They use chemical reactions to make copies of their DNA. Now, you need to remember that the chemical reactions create two copies of the DNA in a reproducing cell. Here also you can see it creates two copies of DNA. Where? In the reproducing cell. And what should be done? That they will be separated from each other. They need to be separated from each other. Now, how it is done? If you keep one copy of DNA and simply the cell will push another copy of DNA, will it work? Can it be done? No, it cannot be done that the cell will keep one copy of DNA, whichever the cell likes, and another copy it will push away from the cell simply. No, this cannot be done. So, what is the way for doing it? There need to be another alternative for separating the DNA copies. Why is this done? Because as we said that simply one copy of the DNA cannot be pushed out. Why it cannot be pushed out of the cell? Because the copy of the DNA which we pushed out will not lead to any organized cellular structure for maintaining life processes. That alone DNA copy will not be able to organize the structure of the cell and will be able to perform life processes. And therefore, the alternative is that the DNA copying that should be accompanied by the creation of an additional cellular apparatus. Remember how it is done? The DNA copying is accompanied by the creation of an additional cellular apparatus. What does this mean? When the DNA copies are made, we already know that DNA copies are made by chemical reactions. So during that chemical reactions, what is done? Additional cellular apparatus are created. Now, what is the meaning of cellular apparatus? Cell organelles. In standard 9, we have learned all the cell organelles, right? Mitochondria, lysosome, vacuoles, endoplasmic reticulum. This all are cell organelles and they are cellular apparatus. So what happens that during a chemical reaction when the DNA copies are made, at that time additional cell organelles, cell apparatus are made. And because this additional cell organelles are made, what happens? This divides to give rise to two cells, which means when the DNA copies are made, additionally already cell organelles are created. So when the DNA copies are separated, they give rise to two new cells. Okay, students, is it clear to you? Simply remember that when the DNA copies are created by a chemical reaction, that time additional cell apparatus are made, and that is why when the DNA copies are separated, it gives rise to two new cells. Now, these two new cells are, of course, similar to each other, but they are not identical. Now, students, do not be confused with these two words. Now, here we have words, one is similar and another one is identical. Please keep your mind clear with this difference of two words. Similar means alike, which have a resemblance, which is nearer, which is close to. So when we talk about similar cells, they are not exact. Okay, they have similar resemblance, they have similar appearance. Okay, so similar is alike, which is resembling, and another one is identical, which means exact, or else we can say that similar in every detail. Okay, so please keep the difference in mind. Again, I am saying similar, which is alike, resemblance, which has properties nearer or close to the other, and identical means exact. So, students, please keep the difference very well in your mind. So, the two cells which are made, they are similar, alike, but they are not identical. Now, it says us that the DNA copies which are generated will be similar to the parent cell, but it will not be identical to the original cell. Some of these variations might be so drastic that the new DNA copy cannot work with the cellular apparatus it inherits. What does that mean? Sometimes variations means changes are so much that changes cannot work with the cell apparatus are additionally created during the process. Sometimes it happens. Such a newborn cell will simply die. Why? Because if there is no chance to work that DNA with that cell apparatus, then there is no meaning of that new cell. So that cell will simply die. On the other hand, there could be still many other variations in the DNA copies that would not lead to such a drastic outcome. And thus, the surviving cells are similar to, but subtly different from each other. So, this is all about the topic, do organisms create exact copy of themselves? I'm sure by now you have the answer.